Hello everyone and welcome back to the UConn Huskies Dynasty. It's the off season for year number 5 going into year number 6. UConn finishing 10-3 this year as the 16th ranked team in the country, beating the Wisconsin Badgers. In today's episode, we'll go through a season recap and then we will ultimately go through the off season, get our recruiting done, and prepare for season number 6, where a lot of things might be changing for the UConn Huskies. To start really quick, I'll mention early National Signing Day, which I failed to mention previously. I did not realize we got the center Casey Nestrowitz to commit, but we're really only going after 5 more guys currently. And they're all 3 stars. They're all gems. If I was going after a 3-star, it basically had to be a gem, except for Casey Nestrowitz, where center is just kind of a position of need. It looks like we may actually lose Cal Volk, the 3-star gem, to Temple, as they are making a huge push. But anyway, let's get started in the season recap. So we opened the season against Minnesota with a win. Had a pretty bad loss to Arizona where we kind of just collapsed in the second half. Got our signature win on the season, 16-13 in a rain game over Alabama. Alabama ended up making the playoffs, shutting out Kansas, but then losing to Kansas State. Then we go on a huge winning streak, as we tend to do, but then losing a heartbreaker to the Miami Hurricanes, 24-22, which ruined our chances of making the college football playoff, winning our final home game of the year against BYU, and then ultimately winning the Alamo Bowl against Wisconsin. You know, it was a season of ups and downs, but we ended up having one of the best offenses in the country, which is shocking because we had one of the worst offenses in the Big 12 when it was Cole Welliver starting at the beginning of the year. Our pass offense was still really nothing to write home about. You got to scroll a really long ways to find us. But our rush offense was the best in the country thanks to Max Cadet, thanks to Shaq McBath, and thanks to Dorian Tobin when he switched to quarterback and brought that rushing ability to that position. I'll start sorting these by Big 12, but we may go look and compare nationally. It's just easier to find UConn, obviously, sorting by just the Big 12. We averaged 31.5 points per game, which was in the high end of the Big 12, and a pretty good number, to be honest. We were pretty middle of the pack to maybe bottom half of the pack in passing touchdowns, and then honestly not super high in rushing touchdowns either. We evidently did not score a lot of touchdowns, but we did lead the Big 12 in first downs, and I'm actually curious, we did lead the nation in first downs. Defensively, in terms of yardage, we did not do very well. We're one of the bottom teams in the Big 12. Specifically, I think because our passing game was really bad, but look at our rush defense. We allowed less than 1,000 yards on the season, which is best in the country for rush defense. We did allow the most passing yards in the country, but that is because teams had to be so one-dimensional against us. We were also 3rd in the country in sacks. We had a really good pass rush this year for the first time in a long time, led by guys like D'Angelo Townsend and Adonis Keough, as well as Joey Terrell, who had a lot of sacks. And we were near the top of the country in interceptions as well with 17. Shout out George Kiki. For third down percentage, we were the 2nd best team in the country, only to Penn State. 4th down percentage was only 60, but we only attempted 5 on the season, and our 2-point percentage was 50%. In years past, we've had some of the worst red zone efficiency, and that's continued this season. Only 42% in the red zone, which is 2nd worst in the Big 12, only to BYU. And like always, we have like the lowest penalty numbers, but it is up from normal. I really like where the penalties are at currently, where it does seem like guys with bad penalty tendencies do just get holding calls more frequently. Looking at Manny Smith, for example. And we did have a positive turnover differential this season with +6. I want to say we were in the negatives last year. Here's the stats on the season for everyone. Weird year at quarterback. Tobin did play pretty admirably when he started playing. In the ground game, Shaq McBath was the leading rusher, but Max Cadet ended up having the most touchdowns. Neither player fumbled this season, or at least they didn't lose a fumble. In the receiving game, it's all Dalton Schmizniak. 65 for 1,112 touchdowns. Nobody else is even close. In fact, nobody else is even over 400. Brock Montgomery being the number 2 receiver, 33 for 397 and 4 touchdowns, and then Angler 32 for 380 and 3. Feel free to pause, take a look, and read any of these other stats if you want to. I'm really only going to be focusing on sort of the top guys. The person who gave up the most sacks this season was the redshirt senior Jack Hines, who was a transfer earlier in the series. And to be honest, he was okay throughout his career and his time at UConn. But I do think that in this last season as a senior, he saw a little bit of regression, honestly. He was not as good. Defensively, Raheem Lovelace leads us in total tackles with 112. We'll take a look at his career stats in just a second. Solo tackles is Joey Terrell, however, and TFLs is Joey Terrell by a mile. 17 more tackles for loss than Raheem Lovelace. In terms of sacks, I've mentioned a few times, we didn't really have a guy that was just like super elite at getting sacks. It was just kind of everyone getting back there frequently. We did send a lot of blitzes this year. That was kind of our defensive identity, was blitzing most of the time, sending at least 5. D'Angelo Townsend, after the bowl game, ends up leading the team in sacks with 8.5. Adonis Keough, this is his freshman season, has 8 sacks. He's going to be a stud. Joey Terrell with 7.5 out of the linebacker position. Raheem Lovelace 6.5. AJ Hepburn 4.5. Clyde Novak was a transfer, had 4. By the way, he's only a sophomore. He'll be a junior next year. He's actually even younger than Corin Daly. And speaking of Daly, he had 3 sacks. It was a quiet year for Daly. I think he showed up a little bit more near the end. Byler with a couple. McNulty with a sack and a half. He's going into his senior season. And I mentioned showing you Raheem Lovelace's career stats, so we'll do that right here. So he immediately was a starter as a true freshman, but he was playing alongside some guys who were a bit ahead of him in the depth chart. Had 84 tackles, which is still very, very good. Had 96 in his sophomore season. Only 9 TFLs though. No sacks, which is interesting considering he got 6 or more in his final 2 seasons. I think that this year is his best season. He was used much less in the passing game, but he did force 3 fumbles. I'm going to miss him a ton. He's the kind of the heart and soul of the defense. He's the team captain. I think everyone loved him, and it hurts to see a guy like this go. But you know, that's what makes these college football rebuilds so fun, is that you fall in love with these types of players and eventually they have to leave, because it's not like the NFL. I can't sign this guy to a 10-year contract and keep him around forever. We've got to let him go. So I went ahead and looked up the list. Raheem Lovelace has 401 career tackles as a UConn Husky, which would be good for 6th all time on the tackles leaderboard for UConn. John Dorsey being the number 1 at 495. He had a single season record of 184, which Raheem obviously did not get close to. Really quickly, before we do any more recapping, I'm going to advance the week just so that we can see who won bowl games and what the final records for everyone are. Before I advance though, here is a look at the bracket. This is the official college football playoff bracket. Texas Tech winning the Big 12 ends up the top team there, and they are the 3 seed. Big surprises I think would be Tulane, who since joining the ACC have been absolutely incredible. Boise State has made it here as well. But then nothing else super surprising. I guess maybe Stanford being here is shocking. And honestly, the most shocking thing is not seeing teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and other huge names. Cal Volk has actually decided to commit to UConn. I did not see that coming. I honestly thought we were going to lose him to Temple. Does not hurt to have the additional halfback depth. And who knows, with that gem, maybe he has elite development. We've gotten 3-star gems with elite development in the past. By the way, if you were curious, here are the job offers I'm receiving. I could go be the head coach at Troy or at Mid-Tennessee State, or I could even be the offensive coordinator at LSU. But no, we're sticking with UConn for the long haul. So after Bowl Week 1, Boise State upsetting Stanford moves on to play North Carolina. Nebraska beating Penn State goes to play USC. Auburn decimating Tulane and going on to play Texas Tech. And then Alabama kind of beating the crap out of Notre Dame. They'll go on to play LSU. So if you are curious about the bowl games and how they went, here they are. Feel free to pause, take a look, see if your favorite team won. BYU lost to Wyoming, which is a little embarrassing. Georgia dominating Michigan State. Georgia did actually have a really good year. They went 10-3 just like us, likely missing out because of a 3rd loss just like us. Florida beating Ohio State. Ohio State still ranked 20th somehow, despite going 7-6 on the season. I guess they would have been 7-5 in the regular season. North Texas over Pitt. Cal over Arizona. Syracuse over East Carolina rather. Oregon over Georgia Tech. Oklahoma State over Tennessee in a very low scoring game in the Texas Bowl. Kind of just looking for any like surprising upsets. But so far, I'm not seeing anything crazy until I just saw the team that kicked us out of the playoffs, Miami, losing to Tulsa. Kansas State beating NC State, Oregon State winning, Texas winning their bowl game, Virginia beating Missouri, Virginia Tech beating Utah, Liberty beating Illinois, and UMass getting shut out by Miami, Ohio. And then Florida State losing to the Washington Huskies. Go Huskies. So now, before we advance any further, let's take a look at the award winners. Player of the Year was Penn State's quarterback Ezekiel Okoye. Coach of the Year was Calvin Stanton of Western Kentucky. The fact that we're not even being considered doing what we're doing with UConn is devastating. Best defensive player is Joey Terrell, and then Raheem Lovelace finishes third. D'Angelo Townsend, by the way, here as well, listed 12th. Best defensive back is all three of our guys, which is insane. Hepburn, Kiki, and Byler. Best running back, Buck Griffin wins that. Shaq McBath finishes fourth, even though I don't think his year was that great. Best receiver is Corbin Silva. Dalton Schmizniak not listed. The Lombardi Award goes to Liati Boss from USC. D'Angelo Townsend going 10th. Best defensive end, D'Angelo Townsend finishes 6th. Best interior lineman, I doubt there are any UConn in the linemen at all. Best tight end, no UConn players here. Royals Award goes to Tony Rhodes. Two Western Kentucky guys up here, offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Best linebackers are Joey Terrell and Raheem Lovelace. Hey, and talk about a redemption arc. Zach Costanzo in his senior season wins kicker of the year. As for All-Americans, somehow on the national first team, Raheem Lovelace makes it over Joey Terrell, despite the fact that Joey Terrell won Defensive Player of the Year, somehow not a first-team All-American. That will never make sense to me. The second team, Shaq McBath, makes the national second team, and Byler makes the second team. Again, no Joey Terrell. And for the national all-freshman team, Dennis Colin made it as the right outside linebacker. I don't know that he played very much at all. If we look at the All-Big 12 first team, Shaq McBath has made it, as has Raheem Lovelace. And for the second team, Dorian Tobin makes it as the quarterback, which is shocking because he only played 6 games. Joey Terrell makes it as a linebacker, and Byler makes it as a safety. It will never make sense to me how the Defensive Player of the Year isn't the first team. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and advance the week once again. Boise State loses to North Carolina in the college football playoff. Nebraska beating USC in an upset. Auburn beating Texas Tech by a point, and LSU squeaking by Alabama. So LSU, Auburn, and Nebraska, North Carolina in the semifinal. So we advance the week again, and it's LSU versus Nebraska in the college football championship, the national championship. LSU kind of dominating Auburn 27-10, and Nebraska just barely beating UNC 26-23. Taking a look at the Nebraska roster, it's pretty solid, but nothing that super jumps out at you. They're led by James Leber, their scrambler archetype quarterback with 85 speed. Their main man, though, is Manuel Garcia, a senior halfback who is an absolute stud, 96 overall. But then they're very weak at receiver. Brian Flores, apparently no longer the defensive coordinator for the Vikings, has joined the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Really, really good at tight end. I mean, insanely stacked. And they do appear to have a really good offensive line, so I'm sure that they've just been relying on their halfback. Defensively, though, it seems like this team is really, really solid. Lots of 90s, lots of high 80s guys. Yeah, I could see how this team could go on a run. It's not the best roster I've ever seen, but it's really solid. As for LSU, maybe a little bit more expected, though they are weaker at quarterback with Colin Hurley. At halfback, they have Deontay Cook at an 88 overall, and then they are much better at wide receiver. LSU kind of wide receiver U, this is known. Jelani Watkins, Michael Turner, and Kylan Billiott are all 90 plus overall, and they're all seniors, so they're losing a lot of weapons after this season. They are not nearly as strong at tight end, obviously, Arian Charles being the number one guy there. And then it looks like their O-line is not as good as Nebraska's. It's still okay. It's better than ours, that's for sure, but it's not as good as Nebraska's. And then defensively looks pretty similar. Looks pretty stacked, probably a bit better than Nebraska's, a bit more balanced. And per a request from last season, I'm just going to jump into this game and we're going to kind of see how it plays out. We're not going to watch the whole thing by any means. We're mostly just going to sim through it and see if the ending is close at all. So it's LSU versus Nebraska for the national championship, a team that is a little more expected to be here in LSU, and then an underdog in Nebraska trying to go on their national championship run. Who's going to take it all? So like I said, we're mostly just going to super sim, and we're going to do it super quick. We're not going to be here that long. I do think it will be interesting to watch the game at the end if it is close. LSU currently up 7-0 as we approach the end of the first quarter. Nebraska really struggling on offense, but LSU not doing a ton better outside of the one touchdown. They will take a 10-0 lead, though. Nebraska needs to get an answer here. But I think maybe there was a pick 6 in there. 17-0 for LSU, currently dominating the Cornhuskers. They punted away again. 7 minutes left in the second quarter. LSU, all them right now. Nebraska, they continue to get backed up by penalties, it appears, but they'll kick a field goal. 17-3, a little bit more respectable. LSU trying to score before the half, and they do so, matching that 3. So now it's 20-3. Nebraska really would like some points before halftime. They're gonna have to punt it away, really no choice. And a 75-yard touchdown pass to Kylan Billiot scores right before halftime, and LSU is up 27-3. Gonna have to be the most miraculous comeback from the Cornhuskers. Oh my goodness, they're driving down the field and they score instantly to start the second half. That's exactly what they need. They go for the 2-point conversion. They fail to get it. It's 27-9 as their defense needs to start getting some stops. 3rd down and 6, 4th and 6. They do get a stop, but LSU adds a field goal. Nebraska has to get touchdowns on every single drive if they want a chance. They punt it away. And to be honest, even though it's still only the 3rd quarter, yeah, and there's another touchdown, that seals it. LSU going to be your national champions. I was hoping the game would be a little closer. We could jump in the 4th quarter and watch some intense moments. I'll do that in future seasons for sure, but this game just not close. It's just all LSU. Nebraska, though, hold on a minute, making a comeback a little bit. 2 minutes left. No. Oh my God. Another super long touchdown for LSU. The receivers are just too good, man. They've got 3 90+ overall receivers. You're just not keeping up with that if you're Nebraska. And that's just how the game played out today. LSU are your national champions. So officially, it is time for the offseason. We are finally to that point. So we just have to advance a couple times at this point, and we are officially to the players leaving screen. Nobody's transferring. It's all graduations, and for Lovelace, he is projected round 1 of the NFL draft, but everyone else just graduation and nobody transferring out. Not a lot of seniors this year, though we had some good ones. Blake Franks, I will of course miss. Raheem Lovelace is the heart and soul of really the whole series. Sucks to see him go. Shaq McBath, Brock Montgomery, and even Cole Welliver for a time. A salute to these guys. Good luck in your future endeavors as we will advance once more. So now we are to the transfer portal, and I do want to make a splash in the transfer portal if we can. It really just depends on what is available for us. Is there anyone that doesn't have us locked out? It doesn't seem like it. We're locked out of a lot of these guys. So it's another year where there are just no 4-stars interested at all. And there's only one 3-star guy interested, and that is Bryce Suttle from Syracuse. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, but nobody wants to transfer to UConn despite the increased success these days. I am going to go after Suttle, but to be honest, that's just about the only player I'm going after in the transfer portal. I will scout him quickly because we have far too many points. He does have good strength and honestly seems like a pretty decent blocker. He might see some playing time, remains to be seen. By the way, our pro potential has shot up to an A- now that Raheem Lovelace got drafted in the 1st round. Just saw that while I'm adding points to all these players. By the way, Patrick Matungalu, the wide receiver for Wisconsin, is transferring. He's a guy I would have loved to have gotten. We need wide receiver help pretty bad, but just not interested at all in UConn. He'd already locked out his top 5. I guess our playing style is a deal breaker for him. Bryce Suttle is legitimately the highest rated player that has any interest whatsoever in playing for UConn. So after taking a look through the recruiting board and the transfer portal, scouting a number of players, this is it. There's no 3-stars even that are available in just the regular prospect list at this point. Outside of Bryce Suttle in the transfer portal, there's nobody that even remotely interests me. They're all 2-stars. There's no gems. I would have loved to have kind of filled out the roster a little bit more using the transfer portal. It's just that I guess UConn's still not a place that a lot of players want to play. So this is what I've done. I've maxed out points on everyone that I can. I've scheduled visits for the 4 guys that are available for scheduled visits, and we'll just start advancing. Gonna be a quiet offseason for recruiting. Here's the draft results, by the way. Raheem Lovelace was drafted in the 1st round. Don't know where to, but just that he was a 1st round draft pick. Love to see it. Love ya, Raheem. I'll miss ya. Juan Beaver, the tight end, has committed. He is a 3-star gem. I'm actually pretty excited to see what he can do. Perhaps the Marcus Angler replacement. We are still in 1st on everyone that we're looking to get at the moment. including the kicker Tyree Collis and the athletes DeAndre LaRue and Alex Fayad. Bryce Suttle, we're in first. We're competing with Boston College, but we have scheduled him for a visit here in week number 2. So nothing to do at this point really other than just advance again. DeAndre LaRue, the center, has committed, as has Alex Fayad, the halfback. Still in first on Suttle, Wake Forest has overtaken Boston College, but we're looking really good there. And it looks like we're probably going to get Tyree Collis as well, although Oklahoma is starting to make a bit of a push. So nothing to do but advance one more time. And we have landed Bryce Suttle, trying to help out that offensive line even a little bit more. Figure it didn't hurt to get as many offensive linemen in as possible. And then Tyree Collis, the kicker, who hopefully has more upside than our current kicker, has committed as well. So that does it for us officially. We've gotten everyone we wanted. The only guys we really missed out on were these 3 at the bottom with Christine Poljan, Rashad Tryon, and Matt Griggs. I decided to add one more player, Byron Shakir, a utility fullback. He's a gem. I just found him, figured I'd spend some more of our scouting points or scouting hours. Why not? We've never had a fullback. Why not officially finally have one? So we'll advance one last time. Hopefully we land Byron. If not, it's not the end of the world. He ends up committing to Nebraska, actually, the team that just lost the national title. Unfortunate. So we are officially to National Signing Day. We did lose out on Byron Shakir, of course, so he goes into our list of players we didn't get. But this is our recruiting class. Let's see how it stacks up compared to other top classes. It's 5th, our first top 5 recruiting class. Got 3 5-stars, 10 4-stars, and 10 3-stars. And so now we get to see what their development trade is. So starting with Bryce Suttle, he has elite development out of the transfer portal. Well, am I glad that we went after him. Elite development out of the transfer portal is wild. You got impact for Tyree Collis, the kicker. You got impact for DeAndre LaRue. Star for Alex Fayad. Impact for Juan Beaver. Star for Cal Volk, the halfback. Normal for Casey Nestrowitz. Star for Anthony Giordano, the 4-star receiver. Impact for the 4-star receiver Matthew Deese. Impact for Lawrence Rogan. Impact for Gordon Hagens. Impact for Athea Ndukwe, the corner. Star for Daryl Skaggs, the receiver. Normal for Sam Halapio, which is a shame. Star for Kareem Ursua, likely to be the halfback of the future for us. Normal for Jamichael Newton, a little disappointing as the 5-star tackle. Star for Larry Vitale, the blocking archetype tight end. Star for Iosefa Duggan, the corner. Normal for right guard Tevin Dobbs. Star for Deontay Garbutt. Star for James Ford. Elite for the cornerback John Catapano. Is it Catapano? Is it Catapano? You let me know. Star for Isaiah Horner, the 3-star athlete. Christine Poljan was elite, by the way. This is a guy that we missed out on. 96 speed as a corner. Oh, dude, that hurts so bad. I always look at these and they just make me feel terrible. Rashad Tryon only normal, which is good. Matt Griggs impact and Byron Shakir impact. But Poljan being elite, that hurts that we lost him. Second time that Georgia has stolen a 5-star gem from us. If you recall, they got Tank Easy, a defensive end from us a few seasons ago. But really good recruiting class again. Probably not as good as last season, but still very good. By the way, Tyree Collis does have the mega leg ability and has 93 kick power, which is already better than our current kicker, so he will be starting as a true freshman. As for the other classes, Georgia had the top class, and I'll scroll through quickly and feel free to pause and take a look how your favorite teams did. I don't see anything super shocking. I love seeing Tulane up here in the top 40. That's awesome. They just had an excellent season. It kind of fell apart at the end, but really cool to see another, somewhat smaller program like UConn kind of developing almost alongside us a bit as we scroll through. Western Kentucky, Kennesaw State, a top 50 class. Western Kentucky as well, top 50. Really cool for them. Illinois way down here at 56. BYU 65. They're not getting great recruiting done. Are there any huge names? Minnesota way down at 91. Arizona 96. Duke, Rutgers down here. Some decent teams with some not so great recruiting classes. Who had the worst? It was Air Force, only getting 6 total recruits. And so now it's time for some position changes if we want to. So the real question is, what do we do with Dorian Tobin? So he becomes a 94 overall receiving back. Wherever we move him to, that's where he's going to get his offseason training bonus. Do we think that Pelshak is going to take a big enough jump and become the QB1 next season? I don't want to move Tobin back to receiver because he's basically at his maximum at 83 at receiver, whereas he has some growing room at quarterback and at halfback. Currently, my lean is to have him stay at quarterback, and I'll explain why. He's already a 94 receiving back. We can move him to halfback from quarterback just during the regular season, not worry about getting those upgrades, and he'll still be an elite receiving back as a junior. But if we leave him at quarterback, he could see some significant improvement, and then, maybe he is the starter in his junior year at quarterback. So I'm going to leave him at quarterback for now. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comment section. We can always move him later on. So now for our athletes. DeAndre LaRue. Looks like he is a defensive tackle / edge rusher, or he's actually not terrible at offensive line either. You know what? These blocking stats are really pretty balanced. We've got a lot of depth for pass rushers. Let's make DeAndre LaRue like an interior offensive lineman. I'm going to put him at left guard for now. Kareem Ursua, I think, is just a halfback. Apparently, he's an 81 overall utility fullback. He's an 80 overall tight end. He's evidently a very good safety and a really good receiver and a really good middle linebacker. The guy can do it all. He plays everything. He's the halfback of the future, in my mind. That's where I'm putting him. Next up is Lawrence Rogan, who is a quarterback, presumptively. Looks like elusive back would be his backup position. I was hoping he'd be more of a receiver with his speed, but he does not appear to have very good hands or great route running. For now, I am going to make Lawrence an elusive back. We may change him back to quarterback depending on what we do with Dorian Tobin. Next athlete is another quarterback guy, Sam Halapio. I was kind of hoping he might be able to be a tight end, but only 56 overall there. So really not much of an athlete. He can play halfback. I'm going to put Sam at quarterback for now. Alex Fayyad came in as a receiving back, but apparently is a really good edge defender and potentially a good slot corner. It's always good to check on those things though. Sometimes that stuff feels like it lies to you. So his press coverage is absolutely horrendous, but he does have good man and decent zone and pursuit. He's also got good finesse moves and power moves. He's a weird player, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. He has good speed at 92. It's a little strange because he is better elsewhere. I'm going to put him at receiver and see how he develops. And then the last one is Isaiah Horner, who was a power rusher archetype guy. And it looks like that's really all he's good at. He can be an outside linebacker. He can be an edge rusher. He can be a defensive tackle, but that's what he does. That's who Isaiah Horner is. He rushes the passer. We'll just make him a left end. Also, I'm taking a mulligan on one of my decisions. I'm moving Lawrence Rogan back to quarterback. I'm actually going to make Sam Halapio the halfback of the two. Halapio has less development trait, so I'd prefer if Rogan, I think, was at quarterback and could maybe develop to be an eventual replacement for John Pelshak. And that's going to do it for position changes for now. We might change other things once we know a little bit more after the off-season training. So we're going to advance. It's the moment of truth. Training results. Joey Terrell stays at a 92. A little disappointing, but I figured he was probably close to his maximums. And yeah, he's right on him. But 92, he's still elite. He's, been the best defensive player in the country maybe for the past 2 seasons. Addison Biggs a 92, D'Angelo Townsend a 91, Byler an 89. George Kiki does take a significant jump up to an 88 along with his other corner, Jamie Santos. Let's go position by position. Dorian Tobin does jump up to an 88. Pelshak is an 84. Tobin's short and medium accuracies are incredible. Pelshak's only 1 worse. Deep accuracy for Pelshak, though, is 3 worse. They're the same on the run. Tobin better under pressure. Pelshak actually better break sack, and Tobin way better play action. This is why I wanted to leave him at quarterback to see if he saw big upgrades like he has. Pelshak's not super slow. He also isn't particularly fast either. He won't bring the same scrambling ability, obviously, but he does have the elite development. So is there something to be said for him immediately starting to get just, developed? Let me know what you think in the comments. At halfback, it's Max Cadet that takes the huge jump. That was expected. He goes to an 86, which actually isn't a huge jump. It was from 84 to 86, but he stands alone at the top of the halfback room. He is going to be a workhorse this coming year, assuming we don't move somebody else to halfback. Dalton Schmizniak, kind of as expected, did not see any development. Still an 82 overall. We knew that he was basically at his ratings maximums last season, and that's as good as it gets for Dalton. He does have 31 skill points to spend. We need to unlock that part of the tree for coaching that allows him to unlock more of this potential. He could be so much better. Tevin Madu jumps up to an 81, now the wide receiver 2. Terry Overhauser was basically also at his ratings maximums, is now sitting at an 80 going into his junior season. Jeffrey Ritchie is now the wide receiver 4. He does have star development and can get a decent bit better with his hands, so he has a little bit more upside than some of the other guys above him. David Gastineau, despite the star development and having maybe the highest ceiling of all the receivers on the team, saw little to no development and basically will not play this season. At tight end, Marcus Angler has dropped to 5th on the depth chart. The guy should have just transferred. I'm probably just going to tell him to transfer. It sucks. I love Marcus Angler, but I think it's time for somebody else to take over. Maybe Dan Sanders, maybe Randy Ty, whoever it is. I think it's just time to move on from Marcus. So here's the offensive line upgrades. Offensive line obviously was a huge concern last season. Ted Booth at left tackle is up to an 85. Nolan Lindsay jumps up to an 88 as our left guard. Center Wayne Rourke, 82, not the best. Right guard Russ Ehlers at an 85. We probably should have moved Ehlers to center now that I'm thinking about it when I was doing the position changes, but it's all good. I'll change that later. Dexter Ort also an 85. And at right tackle, Manny Smith up to an 87. But how much do we trust the guy to not get those holding penalties? I think we have to at least give him a chance. Adonis Keough up to an 86 overall in his sophomore season, turning into a superstar right in front of our very eyes. Johnny McNulty, for what it's worth, is up to an 82. 91 for D'Angelo Townsend and Kevin October, who will be a redshirt freshman this season, up to an 82. At defensive tackle, Clyde Novak jumps to an 88 for his junior season. And then Calvin Whitaker and Darren Michelle have jumped Corin Daly, who's now 4th as a senior. My lean is to start Darren Michelle, but you look at these power moves and finesse moves from Corin Daly, and you just feel like you have to start the guy. 87 and 87 for each. His block shedding's maybe not as high as, Clyde Novak, for example, but he's got the best power moves and finesse moves in the position group. I don't know, man. I feel like I need to start him. Addison Biggs up to a 92, in contention maybe to take over the sort of second middle linebacker, the second sub linebacker role behind Joey Terrell. My initial lean was to give that to Dennis Colin, but he may not be ready yet. At middle linebacker, of course, Joey Terrell up to a 92, absolute menace and a stud. And at right outside linebacker, Dennis Colin, who does have elite development, is up to an 88. Still very, very good. At corner, all 3 of our senior corners are 88 overall. Kiki, Santos, Hepburn, they've all seen some significant improvement. And all 3 of them have platinum house call, which is disgusting. Hepburn's going to continue to play in the slot. The other 2 will be out on the edges. I think we'll have Kiki with the 97 speed now be our primary guy. He's the guy that I want to be one-on-one in man coverage with the best receivers in the game. But at the same time, maybe it should be Santos. He does have gold blanket coverage to Kiki's bronze. For some of the younger guys, Alfonso Ruiz is a sophomore, is up to an 82. Randy Radovich, who has 97 speed, is up to an 81, and Bill Hogue a 76. Corner, a big need for us going forward. Going to need to go pretty heavy in recruiting because we'll be losing Kiki Santos and Hepburn after this season. At free safety, it's actually David Maddox taking the biggest jump here. Giuliano stays basically stagnant at 81, which is interesting because he has a lot in run support he could improve upon, but everything else is basically as is. He's mostly just a really good athlete. He was a 2-star. David Maddox with the impact development has jumped him and has a long ways to go in terms of improvement. So it's looking like David Maddox will be the starter at free safety over Nick Giuliano this season. And at strong safety, it's still Byler at an 89. Joshua Dora finally seeing some improvements, up to an 84, Putu an 83. We may even let a guy like Joshua Dora start over Maddox at free safety. Maddox, the 82 speed just concerns me a little bit. Love the 98 play rec though. At kicker, Russ Schuler did see some increases, but his kick power is horrible. 84, 79 kick accuracy. I think we let him walk. It's going to be Tyreek Hollis from day one. Just have to use that 93 kick power with the mega leg physical ability. And at punter for his senior season is Roger DeLuca, who is absolutely horrible. So we will advance the week after those training results. Like I said, let me know in the comment section how you're feeling about the team, what you would do with the roster the way it is. I think it's definitely the most well-rounded roster we've ever had. So now is the toughest part. It's to encourage some transfers. So the first thing I always do is if there's like a senior that just straight up isn't going to play, I'll encourage them to transfer out. Neil Powell, not a senior. I don't think he's ever going to see playing time. He is basically at his ratings caps right now. Calvin Plummer has passed him up. John Pelshak has passed him up. And at this point, I honestly might even trust Lawrence Rogan a little bit more than I trust Neil Powell. So I'm sending Neil Powell away. At halfback, as much as I kind of like Dan Boyd, he is a junior. He's the same class as Max Cadet. He's never going to be as good as Max Cadet. And now he's been passed by Don Lambo in the depth chart. I liked Dan Boyd. I think he needs to go as well. At receiver, a guy that absolutely has to get out of the building is Russ McLeod. He is at his ratings maximums at the 72 overall he's at right now. He has no abilities other than the natural. He's never going to be good enough for UConn at this rate. And as sad as it is, I think Marcus Angler goes. There's a lot of guys above him on the depth chart that can play better than him at this point. He is a better athlete than most of them, I'll say. He has the best acceleration and speed of all of the tight ends, but it's just time for Marcus Angler to move on. I hope he gets to go play somewhere where he'll play a bit more. It was nice having you for the 3 seasons, Marcus, but we'll see you later. Another guy that needs to go is Alani Sandridge. There's so many guys above him on the depth chart at this point, and he is a junior. Goodbye. Same goes for Jason Pears, probably over Alan Rudock. We'll do that one first. And at outside linebacker, I think we're going to send away Taj Coxey. At free safety, we're going to let Nick Giuliano transfer. He's been passed up by a couple of players, David Maddox, and even some strong safeties with like Joshua Dora, for example. So Giuliano, despite being, a pretty good athlete, it's time for him to go and play elsewhere. And then for similar reasons, we're going to send Eric Sauer away. Justice Willis is the future of this position. He has elite development. Eric Sauer, there's just not really room for you at this point. So now we lower our standards and we go again. So to be honest with you, I think one of Corin Daly or Calvin Whitaker needs to go. They're both seniors. Only one of them is really going to be able to see playing time. And I think you look at the overalls and you see that Calvin Whitaker is 4 points ahead of Corin Daly. And you're like, well, that feels like an obvious choice. But then is it really though? Because Corin Daly and Calvin Whitaker, they have the same block shedding. But I've mentioned it time and time again. Corin Daly, way better pass rusher. Finesse moves, 85. Power moves, 85. Whitaker's are only in the 70s. To his credit, Whitaker is quite a bit stronger with the 89 strength and a little bit smarter with higher play recognition. And he does have better physical and mental abilities, though not by much. I'll be honest, I think the guy that goes is Calvin Whitaker. I like Corin Daly too much. See you later, Calvin. Sorry about your bad luck, buddy. And honestly, I think we also let Alfonso Ruiz go. He's already been passed up by Randy Radovich. There's a lot of really good up-and-coming guys below him. He's not going to see playing time this season, and it's only going to get worse for him in following seasons, probably. We're going to encourage him to transfer. I unfortunately cannot force Russ Schuler, the kicker, to transfer, which really sucks. So we're just stuck with 2 kickers on the roster. So we eventually got there with encouraging transfers. We transferred a couple more guys out that you maybe haven't even heard the names of yet, but it's always hard to make those decisions. Next up is custom conferences, and I honestly have quite a bit that I want to change. So first of all, I want to thin out the Big 12 quite a bit. And what I'm going to do for now, just to show you guys this visually, is just move teams to independent and then go from there and move them into the conferences I want them in. So first of all, we're to 2028. It's been a number of seasons now with, these Pac-12 teams over in the Big 12, and none of them have performed super well. Arizona State and BYU in particular, I think, have been pretty bad. And honestly, even Utah has underperformed from time to time. But I think that their name brand recognition is enough to keep them in the Big 12. But first and foremost, I think BYU is leaving the Big 12. UAB went on a tear and won like a freak national title out of nowhere, but has been terrible since I moved them to the Big 12. We're going to demote them back to probably the American. Moving Syracuse to the Big 12 was a mistake. I'm kind of just taking a mulligan on that one. I'm going to move them back to the ACC, I think. Part of the reason for that as well is that it means I can guarantee that I can schedule them every season, as this has become our really main rivalry, I think, as the games are always super, super fun against Syracuse. And to be honest with you, I think Arizona State and Arizona at this point are leaving the Big 12. In the ACC, it's now been a few seasons of USF being here. They have continued to not be good. I think that they're going to go back down as well. And that allows for Syracuse to come back in. And again, I want you guys to kind of think of this as a mulligan. I don't think that this is obviously at this point something that would happen in real life if all of the other stuff we'd already done had happened. I think that I personally pulled the trigger too soon on moving Syracuse, and I'm just undoing that. And a couple of these other smaller conference teams, I think it was too early to move them as well. As for this sort of reformed Pac-12, we already know Utah State is getting moved, and I don't even have to talk about that one. They're getting moved back to the Mountain West as sort of a demotion for being so awful in the Pac-12. And then I kind of think you know where this is going with Arizona, Arizona State, and BYU. They're all joining the Pac-12. At this point, it's 2028. The Pac-12 will be having like a new media deal, for example, and getting bigger brand names, you know, like Utah with BYU after losing Utah State. Arizona rivalry is always fun. I think that this makes a good amount of sense, and it expands the Pac-12 once again to actually be 12 teams. Now, do I think that Arizona State, Arizona, and BYU would be thrilled about having to leave the Big 12 to go to the Pac-12? No, not necessarily. The competition's weaker, and I think the brand recognition's not there as much. But I do think that the Big 12 would likely have this happen anyway. Initially, my plan was to have Cal and Stanford do the same and go back to the Pac-12. But Stanford just won the ACC and made it to the college football playoff. I don't think there's any way the ACC is letting a team like that walk away for free. I think that Stanford would now become kind of the top dog in the ACC due to that. And Cal also coming off a good season, plus it keeps a more regional rival for Stanford in the ACC. However, I do think a team like SMU, who has continued to kind of have poor performances here in the ACC, would potentially get kicked out and, you know, find themselves back in the Pac-12. So now the Pac-12 is 13 teams instead of 12, but I think Colorado State would also go back to the Mountain West at this point, which restores the Colorado State-Wyoming rivalry, which is a big-time border war. This spot in the ACC finally opens up the opportunity for Notre Dame to finally no longer be an independent. They have been independent for long enough, and I think it brings a good amount of competition to the ACC. I know they play the ACC in real life a bunch every season anyway, so it just makes sense. And due to good performances and also good recruiting for UMass, who appears to be out-recruiting everyone else in the MAC, UMass has decided to leave for the American. Not a big jump up, but I would say a jump up. The American is a stronger conference than the MAC. I don't think anyone would deny that. So UMass joins the American. And I do want to round out the Conference USA to make it full 8 teams so that, you know, at least they have a somewhat full conference. So we're going to take some teams that have been underperforming in the American and move them there. That includes Temple. Temple has been bad for years at this point in this series. They went 3-9 in the American last season. And I'm going to have FAU join Conference USA as well, which brings in FAU versus FIU rivalry. And it expands Conference USA to 8 teams. That leaves an open spot in the American for UAB to join. So then you might be wondering what's going to happen to USF. So we are going to make one other change. You might notice that the Big 12 is 1 team short at the moment of an even 16. Well, my initial lean was having Memphis join the Big 12, but then I thought about it, and I think North Texas might make a little bit more sense. They're coming off an excellent season in the American. They're higher overall. They have a good defense. I think that North Texas, who has continued to perform in the American, would now jump on the opportunity to join the Big 12. And what that means, I think, is that Western Kentucky gets the opportunity to jump to the American after 2 very, very good seasons in the diminished Conference USA to join FAU and FIU as Florida teams. So it's a little odd. There's a little more travel in some of these conferences, but I do think it's a bit more balanced than it was before. We are also going to be taking a mulligan on Clemson and Florida State. So to wrap up everything we've changed, UAB and UMass, as well as Western Kentucky, to the American. The ACC, now one of the biggest conferences, has 18 teams, getting Syracuse back, adding Notre Dame, and we're taking the mulligan on Florida State and Clemson, pretending that they basically just never left. The Big 12 loses a bunch of teams, adds North Texas. Conference USA once again becomes a full-sized 8-team conference, which I think the NCAA would have given them that ultimatum the same way they're doing with the Pac-12 in real life. No independents currently, but that's subject to change. In the MAC, it's back to what it was when the series started. No UMass, since UMass has joined the American. The Mountain West is back to 10 total teams, adding back Colorado State and Utah State. The Pac-12 brings back Arizona, Arizona State, and SMU, and adds BYU now that they're no longer being stingy. The SEC stays entirely the same as it was at the start of the series, losing Florida State and Clemson now as we're taking the mulligan there. And then the Sun Belt stays the same as it has been for the last few seasons with no divisions. And I think one team we removed. I think it was Texas State. So big changes, a lot of changes, but let me know what you think of the changes. I think that it makes a little bit more sense than what we had before. And I'm hoping that it means that in the Big 12, we'll play teams that we haven't played a little bit more often. Like we haven't played a UCF a bunch. We haven't played TCU, I think at all, or Texas Tech. I'm not sure if we've played Houston. If we have, I can't remember. But yeah, basically just thinning out the Big 12, adding to some other smaller conferences, sending UAB back down so that they can kind of redevelop once again, giving Western Kentucky the opportunity to be in a better conference than the Conference USA, and then making the Conference USA a full conference again. This does also mean that every conference will now play 9 conference games per season, except for Conference USA, who of course will only play 7, only having 8 teams in the conference. So now that all of that is finally out of the way, we will advance the week. So here is the schedule for year number 6. We open our season against our true rivals, it feels like at this point, Syracuse. It's not technically a rivalry game, but it is to us. Then we play against newcomer to the Big 12, North Texas. Week 3 is off, and then we play Texas Tech finally, I think for the first time since joining the Big 12. We then play Kansas and UCF, which is also a rivalry game, which we need in order to unlock some more coach abilities. Kansas State, Houston, Iowa State, and then I got UMass in here, which is an actual rivalry as well. West Virginia, Colorado, and then Florida to finish the season. But there you have it. That is the off-season episode done for the UConn Huskies as we head to year number 6. Some questions to be answered. Are we ready for a true national championship contention type of push? Who's the quarterback? Is it Dorian Tobin? Or do we let the highly touted John Pelshak finally take over? Move Tobin maybe to running back or receiver and let him sort of be a gadget guy. Let me know what you guys think. What would you do with the team? I think it's easily the best, most balanced roster we have ever had. And it might be the window. We might be at the very start of a national championship window right now. But thank you guys so much for watching, and shout out to the channel members as always. Your guys' support means everything to me. If you guys want to become a channel member, you can hit the join button down below. You can do so for as low as $1 a month. But if you find yourself coming back on the regular and you aren't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that sub button for me. It does help me out a lot, and I will see you guys in the next episode where we'll get started in year number 6.